Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Avexia webinar series. Our topic for today is hidden causes of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, insomnia, and more. My name is Christopher Chu. I'm the Director of Marketing for Avexia Diagnostics and will be your host. Today I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by an exciting guest, Dr. Diane Mueller, who will be our presenter for this webinar. Dr. Mueller is a catalyst for holistic healthcare with a dual doctorate in Naturopathic medicine and Acupuncture, as well as Oriental medicine. Author of the best-selling book, It's Not in Your Mind, she has been featured on Fox News and numerous healthcare summits and podcasts. She owns a medical clinic, MyLymeDoc.com, and the sex education site, MyLibidoDoc.com. Without further delay, I will now turn the webinar over to Dr. Mueller.
Hey everybody, welcome to our conversation about insomnia, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and those missing root causes. One of the things I often find for so many people is that as much as we're doing holistic medicine, functional medicine, root cause-based medicine, many times when we do the basics, when we fix the gut and we work on the diet and we work on the lifestyle, we work on the stress, we fix the thyroid, we fix the hormones, these common things, that does take care of a lot of people. But then we have this other group of people that I find often make their way into functional medicine, which is the people that when you do those basics for, they're not getting better. And that's what we're talking about today. I'm super excited for this presentation. My name is Dr. Diane Mueller. I am a double doctorate. I've been in practice for 15 years. I'm a best-selling author of It's Not in Your Mind, which is solutions and strategies for chronic diseases such as Lyme and mold illness. And I'm also a board-certified sexologist. So that's a little bit about me. I love teaching this stuff to my colleagues. So thank you so much for being here, and let's get started on this juicy information. Okay, so what are our main missing root causes? So can't include everything today, of course, but these are some of the things we're going to cover that I find come up most of the time when we're dealing with, why do these people have symptoms and they're not responding? Their thyroid is not responding, or you treat the thyroid and they are still finding that they are completely tired and completely out of it and they have the brain fog, right? When we do this and we do these basics and we go through our Dutch testing and we're looking at hormones and we're looking at melatonin and somebody's still not sleeping, what is going on, right? What is going on when somebody has a multiple systemic type of situation where they have signs of gut problems and signs of hormone problems and signs of dysbiosis and signs of neurological issues and on and on and on and on. These are some of the top categories we should be thinking about: chronic hidden infections, chronic hidden toxins. I threw reactive oxygen species and inflammation in here, not because it's a root, right? I never like considering this as a root, but just to say that anything that is going to create this reactive oxygen species increase, an inflammatory process, whatever the root causes of that, those are the long-term trickle-down impacts that can be causing some of the symptoms we're talking about. For example, with insomnia, one of the biggest things I find with insomnia is that people, when they're neurologically inflamed, they can't sleep. So this is the person that's tried the melatonin and the GABA and the kava and the California poppy, and maybe the only thing that's making them sleep is something like Ambien, right? So what is going on, especially when you've worked on sleep hygiene, they're hydrated, they're not exercising before bed, you got the blue light out and all of those basics. Oftentimes, if you've covered all that and this person is like, I just can't sleep, or I fall asleep but I'm up all night, it's because their neurological system is inflamed, and that is actually what is driving this. We also have to consider MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. So we're going to talk about that. That's a huge reason for not only people reacting to almost anything under the sun. My worst MCAS patient would break out in full body rash when she would showered with filtered water. There was still something creeping through the filter that was causing her to basically not be able to bathe because of her MCAS symptoms being so bad. So we're going to cover all of that, and then we're going to cover testing and next steps. I already told you a little bit about me. One of the things I did not mention is that I do have a functional medicine program. I do make my functional medicine program extremely affordable for people because I want you to have this, this information. There's a lot of programs out there that are $10,000 or $15,000 to join and to learn some of the things in more detail we're going to talk about today. I keep mine nicely priced at $99 a month, and you can come for 1 month and pick out the information you want. You can come and stay for as long as you want. And I do that because I really find it is essential to take information like this and go a lot deeper. So I'm going to cover as much as I can today, but if you are left or if I go quickly through something, just know that you can always join that program to get additional support and to have the ability to go deeper on any of these things. So when we're talking about chronic disease, right, obviously the frame of this was fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, insomnia, etc. But what other chronic diseases are we talking about? So here's where we need to start thinking big picture, right? So a study on toxic metals and chronic symptoms showed that toxic metals can cause any of these types of things, anything from behavioral problems to kidney damage to hypertension to mitochondrial dysfunction to sleep issues, neurological problems, and more. So what is the point? The point is that when we are talking about the things that we are talking about today, where I want your mind to go as far as when do I test for these things is if you're having somebody with widespread symptomatic or systematic types of issues. For example, just like this list, right? They have a neurological symptom. Maybe they have peripheral neuropathy or some numbness, right? They have sleep problems. They have digestive problems. They have brain fog. They have all of these different things. And in conventional medicine, the way I think of this is like if you were to say refer out to the specialist. The types of things we're talking about today, in order to refer out to the specialist, you would need the neurologist and the cardiologist and the rheumatologist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anytime we're saying like a multiple system approach, right, multiple organ system type of impact, that's when we're going to say, oh, this is very, very likely. Then we have to come back and say, well, what are those things that are going to cause this sort of widespread impact on the body? And that's when we get into our toxins. That's when we get into our stealth infections and more. So here's even more of this. I'm not going to read through this all, but again, the study is showing that, okay, there's this link with Alzheimer's, dementia, muscular dystrophy, bone loss, again, on and on and on. We're getting that wide system impact here. So to go through chronic hidden infections. So what we're looking at here, one of the things I like to point out is something called a retrovirus. A retrovirus is what we used to think of as junk DNA. So retroviruses are, if we're looking at our junk DNA, what we actually realize is our junk DNA, as it's been labeled in science, actually contains viral material. And what we call this junk because we would see this viral material insert itself into our DNA, our RNA, and into our DNA. And we thought this was happening in a way that this was like the viral activity would be dead. Right now, we're actually seeing that certain things can re-stimulate this viral activity and that it's not dead, it's not inactive in the way that we thought it was. And there may be links to these junk DNA and things like autoimmune disease, right? So we want to consider that we have all these viruses that we are thinking are dead material in our body that actually aren't as dead as we thought. So that's a really important thing. So when we're talking about hidden stealth viruses, right, we do want to think about our EBVs and our CMVs and our herpes and all of those types of viruses. But we also want to think about these retroviruses, this junk DNA that actually could be reactivated and actually then have problems in our body. So obviously we have these types of viruses. So this study is actually showing that some of these common viruses, like I mentioned, are linked to dementia. And one of the things about dementia that I think is so important is we don't have good treatments, right, for pre-dementia diagnosis, right? So when we're in something like a mild cognitive impairment that is, oftentimes diagnosed by our mental status exams, when we're in this state, right, where we're saying, okay, well, somebody doesn't have the problems with things like executive function or the problems with things like memory to actually give them a dementia diagnosis, they're put into a watch and wait category. And we see that a great percentage of those watch and wait people make their way to the full dementia diagnosis. So this is really important when we're saying, oh, viruses are actually one of these triggers for leading to that dementia, issue. So the point is, when people are coming in presenting and they're saying, I have something like brain fog, is usually what a patient will say. We want to consider that there's this like early warning, mild cognitive impairment situation that is then leading them and setting them up to a dementia diagnosis later on. We also see that other microbes have also been linked to long-term dementia, brain fog, mild cognitive impairment. This is anything from H. pylori. So again, broad picture here. We got to be thinking about the gut, Chlamydia pneumoniae, and even some of our dental organisms as well. So, and this study is actually showing that part of the issue is neuroinflammation, right? So this neuroinflammation is that kind of that predisposing factor, but then we have to take a step back and say, well, what's causing the neuroinflammation? We also see Lyme as a very, very particular thing that can cause all sorts of problems as far as memory issues, neurological inflammation as well. So we do want to consider Lyme as one of our big causes there. Interestingly enough, when we get into some of the dementia research, one of the things we see is that the plaques associated with dementia actually have a immune type of property. So it's theorized by some of these researchers that what's happening with Alzheimer's plaques is that there is this infection, an anti-infection type of immunological property, and the plaques are actually designed as the body's self-preservation way of trying to trap those microorganisms to kill them and to get them out of the brain in this example, because we see many of these things get into the brain. And of course, this process, folds and it fails and it does not go the way that we want it to go. And then somebody ends up with something like Alzheimer's. But to take a step back and understand the mechanism there, we can actually say, oh, the predisposing factor, right? The first thing is saying these plaques are actually designed to do something positive, and then it backfires. And so then it's like, what is that positive? Well, it's trapping things like infections and toxins. This particular study showed Lyme disease as a huge part of fibromyalgia, also HIV. So we see a viral component and we see Lyme disease. I cannot tell you how many people in my clinical practice I have seen reverse fibromyalgia. And Lyme is not, of course, the issue all the time, but it is an issue a lot of the time. I had fibromyalgia so bad in my 20s, and it was Lyme in part that in treating that and reversing that made fibromyalgia go away. So I knew it firsthand, right? I saw it firsthand. And so that's what I think is so exciting about these types of testing and these types of treatment, is that we can really get into some of these major root causes and these things that people are told they have to live with for the rest of their life. We get to help them, get their life back and make them go away. So when it comes to chronic fatigue and ME, we see that there's huge correlations with a ton of viruses. So Epstein-Barr, cytomegalo, herpes, parvo, entero, leti, on and on and on. Mycoplasma, Lyme, Coxiella. So there's so many different microorganisms that, again, are associated with CFS. And this is why, right, the intro to this is like, yes, it's like the thing we say in medicine, right? When you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. Like, we obviously want to start with, okay, is their thyroid working? Are they eating the right nutrition, right? Are they hydrated? Do they have the right amount of sex hormones and stress hormones and all these kind of things? We obviously want to think about all those basics, but there is a huge link for like, okay, this person's chronically fatigued. You get them on thyroid hormone or thyroid support. Their lab values come up. Maybe they get a little like burst. Like oftentimes with Lyme, when I treat something like thyroid, another key clinical pearl is you use something like thyroid hormone to help with the labs, and they get this burst, right? All of a sudden they're like, oh, I feel like myself again, but it doesn't last and it doesn't hold. That's usually a sign that there's something bigger like this going on. So also when we're talking about the endocrine system, right? So we're talking about hormones. Well, we also have to take a step back and say, well, what is all going to cause the endocrine system to get quote unquote out of whack, to get dysfunctional, right? To get where it is not secreting, where we had this abnormality where the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the tertiary glands are just not responding correctly. So one of the things is when we have a virus that will actually cause HPA axis dysregulation, right? So we see that specifically. And so one of the things to take a step back, we can then say is if we have an HPA axis dysregulation, if we're seeing that cortisol curve out of balance, right? Or we're seeing somebody kind of flatline or spike or whatever it is, we do want to talk about stress, and we do want to talk about a maladaptive stress response and what are they doing to support their stress in their life and become more resilient. But we also want to take a look and say, well, what else could actually throw off the endocrine system? Viruses are one of them. We see also that viruses can lead to pituitary problems. They can impact not only things like our thyroid and our adrenals, but also our gonadotropins, right? So our gonadotropin process. We can see our growth hormones being impacted. So we can even see things like our ADH levels being impacted, right? So this is a really cool study of the reference there, but it's basically going and saying like, hey, from a standpoint of endocrine dysregulation, because of the hypothalamic and pituitary impacts of viruses, we can see subsequent downstream changes to our hormonal system. Like I don't think every hormone's been studied by any means, but are the major hormones, some of the major hormones that we think about in functional medicine. So we really want to consider that. We of course want to consider things like now that we're in a post-COVID stage, we of course want to consider things like our long haulers and, is it spike protein issues? Bromelain, curcumin, and nattokinase are a really great triad to help reduce that spike protein in the body. Typically, you want to use those for usually about 90 days to really help somebody, but we want to be thinking about viruses in general as these root causes of some of the chronic fatigue, and it's so much more than just the post-COVID thing, even though that's more forefront on everybody's awareness. We can see viruses affect the ovaries and the testes, so there's some of the sex hormone impact. And sleep orders, we're going to think about viruses, parasites, bacteria, all can actually affect the central nervous system, right? So that's where I'm saying like, okay, this person, they're doing their sleep hygiene, they're doing everything right. They're like, melatonin doesn't work, kava doesn't work, GABA doesn't work. All of theanine doesn't work, all of these things that we use to bring somebody into restful sleep and more of a parasympathetic dominance. And we're seeing over and over and over again that doesn't work, then that's when we really have to think about some of these infections. So if you want to work with more diseases like this, or if you don't want to work with more diseases like this, that's what I mean. If you're listening to this and you're like, wow, like I know some clinicians I talk to, they like to learn about it, but when it comes to things like Lyme, it's like, just let me know when I need to refer out. So one of the things that I do is I have a group online education program for patients. So essentially what this is you keep your patients, you be the doctor. I just educate them about the steps that are needed to recover from Lyme and mold. I'm not doing medicine, I'm just teaching them. And because it's a group education program, you get to keep up to 50% of the commission for this individual if you refer them to me. So it's a way of working together in a way where it's like, you keep the patient, I am, not their doctor, I am just teaching them, and you can make affiliate commission off of that really easily. So that's how you sign up to partner with me on that. Okay, chronic hidden toxins. I am going to have to go a little fast because I know I quickly run out of time in these things. So what we see is that toxic metals can actually cause all sorts of cognitive types of impacts on the body. We see that Roundup, glyphosate's one of the things that it does is it depletes manganese. We see that it's related to Parkinson's, autism, Alzheimer's, all these different types of things. So we need magnesium in the body. And if we don't have, not magnesium, we do need that too, but we need manganese in the body. If we don't have that, we actually see bile acid being, the bile acid process getting dysregulated, which is really important. So this is going to increase the toxic accumulation of the manganese, which will cause problems, right? So many of these minerals like manganese and iron can be very toxic to the body in high doses. So glyphosate is going to basically lead to some of this issue, right? And then because of that, we can also see that as the bile acids are getting impacted, other toxins can build up. So I want to make sure that you know about some of these types of hidden toxins. So the PFOAs and the PFOSs, we can see them with osteoarthritis, so many different problems there. The forever chemicals or the PFAS, these are the things that don't break down in nature. So we see even, for example, high cholesterol associated with the forever chemical. So again, anytime somebody, it's like, if you're thinking about, somebody is not responding to the things that they normally respond to, right? You've gone through the supplement, process and everything that usually works doesn't work, that's when you want to be thinking about these things. Here's a cool chart for you. So this is basically showing what types of waters actually have higher levels over 1 part per trillion of the PFAS. So we see our Perrier and our LaCroix and all these types of sparkling waters that people love. I definitely love them myself, had these really high counts of our PFAS. So we really want to be careful. Like Topo Chico is actually one of the worst. So I have that in there for your information. We also see that certain pollutants will lower things like BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So we can see that as we have these pollutants, right, we have these inflammatory substances in our body, they actually impact not only BDNF, but they actually impact our hippocampus, our dopamine, etc. And then one of the things we see is that inflammation decreases bile activity. So what will happen is when we are chronically inflamed, we get a reduction in cytochrome 7A1 activity. Cytochrome 7A1, its job is to help make bile. And when we have increases in TNF alpha or in interleukin 1B, we actually will see that the activity of cytochrome 7A1 goes down. So we get into this vicious cycle, right, where we have these things, we have these toxins coming in, and these toxins are increasing these inflammatory cytokines, these interleukins. And when this happens, then because of that inflammation, we get a reduction in bile. Well, we need bile to help remove the toxins. That bile flow is also part of the toxins being removed. So as we have more toxins in, we have less bile flow, worse ability to get the toxins out, and the cycle continues. That's where our bile acid movers come in, so important. So another thing we see is that pesticides reduce acetylcholinesterase. So this is basically going to decrease acetylcholine breakdown, and this is going to lead to things like, hey, the nerve fibers are growing in a weird way. We get a weird type of neuronal differentiation, and we can see psychiatric disorders with this. So again, thinking about, okay, we got to get these toxins out. So here's a chart for you that is going over types of air pollutions and types of environmental toxins and looking at, okay, what level of depression low, moderate, and strong is seen. So we see that heavy metals and EMFs have a very strong link towards depression, as well as things like, urban living. So this is a really, interesting chart here. We see increased levels of lead in the blood, and that lead gets into the blood-brain barrier. We get that increase of intracranial pressure as the plasma starts to move into the interstitial spaces. So it's lead in the blood, gets into the brain, it disrupts the communication of the brain. We get a movement of plasma into interstitial spaces, increased intracranial pressure. And this is where we can lead to a lot of that brain fog and these problems. Lead's an example of we get these changes in the head pressure, right? A mechanism like this is similar to what we see in mold and why we see mycotoxins so related to things like headaches and migraines and brain fog and all that. So with MCAS is where we're getting the mast cells breaking down in high amounts, right? So with MCAS, we get this high amount of the mast cells breaking down, and that is leading to these widespread symptoms like I was talking about with my showered lady and filtered water in the beginning. And so with MCAS, we always want to take a step back. Like we can use ketotifen and cromulin, some of our histamine blockers, mast cell stabilizers, those kind of categories. We can use these types of things to help people with MCAS, although some people will react to those. I've seen a lot of people with MCAS relate to the things and the pharmaceuticals that they are supposed to be helping them. So we have to take a step back. The best way to help somebody out of MCAS is to figure out why the mast cells are breaking down, why they are destabilizing. And if we're testing for MCAS, we can do these through the Avexia partnership with LabCorp. So we can run things like serum levels of tryptase and chimases. These are markers that are associated with MCAS. We're looking for increase in these types of things. The things with these types of markers, especially with tryptase, which is highly specific to MCAS, but you really have to catch somebody in kind of the height of that MCAS crisis, right? Where they're feeling like exceptionally bad for these things to be high. Most people, when they're feeling exceptionally bad, are not going to go to the blood draw place and get a blood draw. But here's types of testing you can consider. So tryptase, like I said, is the most significant marker. You can look at prostaglandin A2, urinary leukotriene E4. So these are some basics you can do. But one of the biggest things I would say with MCAS is an histamine intolerance, which is maybe not the mast cells breaking down in high amounts, but it's more histamine coming in than the enzymes of histamine degradation can remove. One of the things I really think about here is if somebody is reacting to almost everything you put in, if you put somebody on magnesium or melatonin or these basic things, or you try to kill Lyme or you try to detox and you give them a tiny little bit of a substance and they have a huge reaction, real good sign of MCAS or histamine intolerance, and in many ways better than those labs, just because of the fact that the labs you really have to catch at that right moment in time. So my favorite testing company for testing metals is Quicksilver. One of the reasons I like Quicksilver is you do get the minerals, right? So you want to know the minerals because minerals, especially zinc, are so important for detoxing metals. We really do need zinc levels to be regulated and to be healthy in order to properly detox. So we get these minerals, but also Quicksilver's technology is sensitive enough that I don't have to chelate people and give them a provocating agent in order to get these metals to show up on a test. And that's great because I find that the sickest people, they react so poorly to the chelators that if we're using some of the other tests, one of the problems I run into is like, and this is just with these sensitive people. With these sensitive people, we need a test that is not going to provoke them in a way that is going to put them in bed for a couple weeks. And that's what I find in this sensitive community, that while some of those other tests can be great for the standard person from a provocating standpoint, the great thing about Quicksilver for these highly sensitive people is that we are able to test without that provoking agent and actually see where we're at, right? So we see this person has that really high level of antimony, a little bit of arsenic and mercury, and then we're starting to get the cobalt and strontium to those high levels as well. It's nice to test methyl mercury versus inorganic. Methyl mercury is going to be from fish, right? So it's going to be more those living sources of mercury. And the reason for testing and distinguishing the difference between this, which is also something Quicksilver does, and this is their mercury tri-test as it's called. And the reason they do this is so that they can begin to talk about and to look at and say, okay, well, where's the sources, right? Do we need to get somebody off of fish? If it's inorganic mercury, where is it coming from? So you can start to really go through their life and say, where are the sources of this? Mycotoxins, we see that mycotoxins, this is real-time labs, which you can also get with Avexia. And so what you're looking here is you're looking to say, okay, well, are all of these present? Here's one where we see a ton of different mycotoxins. The worst category of all of these is the third one down, the trichothecene group. This is basically looking at a bunch of molds. Black mold is a huge one of them, which is known as Stachybotrys, but we also see satrotoxin and all these other types of molds. And this particular category is the most neuroinflammatory. All of these are really bad. And here's the thing. there's a lot of people that are misunderstanding and thinking that you can have high aflatoxins just from peanuts. What I've seen in clinical practice and working this for, on this for 15 years here is that while, yes, some of these foods, our bin foods, our peanuts, our grains can have small levels of some of these mycotoxin tests, not enough to spike really high on these labs, right? And I say that because when people have tried to remove these foods, labs have not changed and symptoms have not gotten better. So this is more coming from their environment. And again, like either if you are like, wow, I don't even know where to begin with it because there's so much to be said, more to be said than we can cover today, then definitely join either my functional medicine training program that I'm going to tell you about here, where we go through these in much more detail, or you can just refer people to my group program and we can partner that way and you can make money. So this is IGeneX, another Avexia partner, and this is going over their Lyme disease. When we're talking about chronic infections, we do want to consider all vector-borne diseases, anything from Borrelia to Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which is not only in the Rockies. I have a lot of colleagues on the East Coast that find it in their patients all the time. And we also want to understand how to properly diagnose this, right? So what we are basing this upon is some of these bands, what we're looking at these bands, which are proteins on the Lyme bacteria, are very specific to Lyme. Others are non-specific. 23 and 93 are both very specific for Lyme. So even though the CDC would say, hey, this is negative, the process and a Lyme literate doctor would say this is positive. So these are other types of infections that we want to consider. This is the tick-borne panel 5IB, and so we want to consider that. Now, the number one treatment mistake I see people make is focusing only on one diagnosis. For example, it's very common sometimes somebody comes to my practice and they're like, I've seen this Lyme doctor and that Lyme doctor and that Lyme doctor and that Lyme doctor. Nothing's working. And they have that Lyme diagnosis and they come to my office and they want my special Lyme treatment. Now, I have great ways of treating them. Cryptolepis is one of my favorite herbs ever. I said that I would cover a little of treatment. So Cryptolepis is one of my favorite herbs ever for Lyme disease. There's great studies on it. And if somebody has seen doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor and nothing is touching their Lyme, almost guaranteed, right? We can't guarantee anything in medicine, but almost guaranteed that it is not just Lyme. And that's a key to say, okay, well, maybe Lyme's even treated and maybe it's mold or maybe it's metals or maybe it's Babesia or one of these other things. Okay, so more treatments beyond Cryptolepis we will cover in my functional medicine training program. So again, this is only $99 a month, you guys. Stay for 1 month, stay for 12, stay as long as you want. We go over Lyme, chronic head infections, mold, metals, other environmental toxins, viral infections, SIBO, IBS, reflux, hormones, thyroid, MCAS, blood chemistry, and functional ranges, if you don't know those, organic acid, food antigen testing, more and more and more and more. And it's only $99 a month. Check it out. Would love to have you. We go more detail into testing, into the testing abnormalities, such as what do all of these different bands for Lyme look like? How do you diagnose some of these other things? What are the treatment? I give you very specific treatment protocols, dosing, duration, what to do if something's not working, all in these tests. And so this one you see on the left is for a functional medicine training program for you guys. So if you're like, I want to learn the protocols, you want to learn my protocols, you want to learn more about these testing, check out this QR code on the left. If you're like, wow, this is great, but when it comes to these complicated chronic things, I really like my thyroid practice, I really like my gut practice, I want to refer out to this, and you want to stay main doctor and help me educate your patients on protocols and what to do, then essentially join my affiliate partner. You'll get an affiliate link. You give that to your patient, your client. They come to my group program. You get up to 50% commission on that. The more you promote, we just kind of kick you up to higher and higher tiers of affiliate commission. So that is why I'm saying up to 50%. So it has been a pleasure. I've been talking really fast because I wanted to get through so much information for you guys today. And thank you for being part of this. I hope I will see you guys in my programs. You can always email us at support at mylymedoc.com. You see on the screen, I also have my libido doc as well. That is my secondary business where I work and I offer sex education, helping people in long-term monogamous relationships have deeper and more profound intimacy with their partner. And that's through education as well. All right, everybody. I hope to see you all real soon. Best of luck with your clinical practices and be well.
For any questions or issues you may have, please contact Avexia Diagnostics by email at info@avexiadiagnostics.com or by phone 5 days a week at extended hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time at 888-852-2723. Thank you, Dr. Mueller, for this informative presentation. Thank you again for joining us on this webinar event. Until next time, from everyone at Avexia Diagnostics and mylymedoc.com. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we wish you all the best on your pathway to wellness.